Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to the fourth in this webinar series, Voices for Palestine, Building Feminist Solidarity. Please note you can access captions and a transcript at the bottom of your screen if you need it. I'm Layla Billing. I'm one of the co-founders of We Are Feminist Leaders. And my colleagues Natalie, Kirti, Arundhati, and Laura are all here supporting us behind the scenes. So I just want to thank them first and foremost for all the amazing work and hard work that they've put into bringing this session to life. Now, look, we start this session refusing to turn away from the devastating context we're in. The amount of ammunition dropped on the tiny Gaza Strip not only far surpasses the atom bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima, it also surpasses the ammunition dropped on both London and Dresden during World War II and Hiroshima combined. We're now at just over a year since the ongoing genocide began, bringing the duration of this colonial violence to 76 years and counting, with recent events showing an escalation of violence in Lebanon. These events are, of course, happening in a wider context of increased militarism globally and genocide and war crimes happening in a number of countries, ranging from Sudan to Myanmar. And we describe this violence with awareness that many of you may be experiencing heaviness and grief from the ongoing situation in Palestine and now Lebanon and beyond. And we want to let you know that we are all here to support each other through these difficult times. In the words of political activist and author Saira Rao, who says, "We are all we have, we are all we ever had. Step into community." So as we proceed together, please know whatever you're feeling, and you can hear my voice, there's a bit of emotion there. So your full, rich emotions, they're welcome here in our community. And we want to curate a space of deep care and deep relationships between us because we know this isn't the work of just a few months or a year or even a few years. So please take care of yourself and each other in this session. Step away at any point if you need to, and please be mindful of others and their needs. And it bears saying, it bears repeating maybe, we won't tolerate any abuse or discriminatory behaviour in this space, and anyone engaging in this way will be removed. So in previous sessions in this series, we've heard from Palestinian writers and activists, including Kifaya Krame, Dr. Nahid Habiballah, and Itaf Rum, who told us all about the gendered impacts of Israeli occupation. And my colleagues will share some of the previous session resources with you in the chat box in case you haven't been able to see those or access those. They're there for you to look at a later date. Now, for over a year, We Are Feminist Leaders has been grappling with one question. What does it really mean to be a feminist leader in this moment? We have felt dismayed, not just by the silence, but also the inaction from many feminists who call themselves self-proclaimed feminist leaders. We have seen feminists who had the power, the platform, and the privilege to speak out remain silent or say little of import, aside from a few statements that are tantamount to nothing more than window dressing. Is this really what we mean by feminist leadership, we wondered? And yet, at the same time, we have felt really heartened and encouraged by the actions of feminist activists across the world who've been mobilizing, organizing, fundraising, and campaigning in support of Palestinian liberation. We noticed that some feminists who couldn't speak out openly were using creative or subversive tactics in their activism. For example, some were setting up anonymous social media accounts in order to advocate and fundraise. We don't need to tell any of the speakers on today's panel that these actions come with a cost. For some of them and many others, and perhaps some of you in this audience today, their speech has been met with violence, with hostility, exclusion, and sanctions. Jobs have been lost and left, donors have withdrawn funding, personal characters and integrity have been impugned, and people have been trolled. In today's session, we want to celebrate the resistance of three feminist leaders. We want to hear about the risks they faced, how they've navigated backlash, as well as their ongoing activism. There's going to be space for you to ask questions later on. Please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen for this. And we also want to recognise that our speakers have taken a leap of faith to be present and vulnerable. So we also invite each other to consider or acknowledge the emotional labour that it takes to have these conversations. And I want to hand over to someone very special now. We are feminist leaders. We are always thinking about how we build power and how we work collectively. And someone who we've been collaborating with for a long time on this session and beyond is the feminist activist, researcher and writer, and that's Chitra Nagarajan, who will be in conversation with our speakers for this session. So Chitra, over to you.
Thank you very much, Layla, and welcome everybody. It's with great pleasure that I introduce our speakers for today. Azar Soliman is a lawyer and co-founder of the Center for Egyptian Women's Legal Assistance. Ria Rodriguez Mukherjee is an activist and writer working on gender, mental health, animal rights, social justice, and pop culture. And Shaista Aziz is a counselor, journalist, writer, and co-director of Three Hijabis. And their full bios will be in the chat shortly. So Azar, Ria, and Shaista, I'd like us to start by exploring your own personal actions and experience before putting them in wider context. So Azar, if I could start with you, you spoke out in support of a ceasefire in Gaza and the BDS movement. Why was it important for you to do so, and what happened next?
Okay, thank you so much for this invitation, and I think this is a good opportunity to talk about our case, Palestine. It is our case, not Palestine case, and I think it is human case, because what happened after what happened, suicide in genocide in Palestine, we can see all the people from all the world went out to support Palestine and ask genocide Israel against Palestine. So I think it is human right, not related in Palestine only. And I am human rights and women rights defenders. So all the time I try to use the international mechanism from UN to support human rights everywhere. And I think this is logic. And what happened when I tried to use international law against what happened in Palestine, because Palestine, Israel destroy all the human rights in Palestine. Destroy the building, destroy the hospital, killed a lot of journalists, killed a lot of women. Now we talk about 50,000 people killed. So I try to use international law related in my life. But what happened after this, when I signed a statement against Israel to use against Israel international law, the German embassy banished us. What happened after this? They cut our fund from the embassy because we signed this statement. And we ask us to cancel this sign to the statement. And really, I shocked in this time, because this is obviously for me double standard. Because we are Black from South, we are not equal. And this is what happened. And for me, the regime, German, the government in German, it is like our government dictatorship in Egypt. They are not different. In Egypt, all the time banish the NGOs, and they don't give us approval for our project. And also, German, the government in German, did the same against us. When we ask about human rights, They told, no, 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 no. You are not like us. You are not like Ukraine. You are not like blonde people, white people. So we cut our fund in your organization, and this is what happened.
Thank you very much, Azza. I'd be very interested to hear about what's happening more broadly in Egypt later. But first, let's go to Shaista. Shaista, you were the first councillor to resign from the UK Labour Party over this issue. What was it that pushed you to take this step, and what has the response been?
Thank you. And first of all, thanks to everybody involved in organising this space today. I very much am feeling a lot of energy from being with my sisters today. So I just want to acknowledge, first of all, the devastation that we're all feeling a year on from the ongoing genocide in Gaza, and now the bombing in Lebanon and the wider region, and everything it means to all of us. It's been a really devastating time. So Chitra, to answer your question, so I was elected as a Labour councillor in my home city of Oxford. I spent more than 6 years serving there as a councillor. It was a real honour for me to be representing my home city. And this time last year, I attended the Labour Party conference in Liverpool. The Hamas atrocities against Israeli civilians had already taken place, and I was feeling very sad and horrified by that, and really, really aware that a catastrophe would be unfolding, a further catastrophe for the Palestinians. So I went to the party conference with real trepidation. And when I got there, I was really horrified at the erasure of Palestinians and Palestine. Palestinians were not being mentioned in any of the rooms that I was walking into. There was complete erasure of Palestinians. So that made my heart and stomach sink further. And then I was hearing some really horrific commentary from people at the conference as well. So by the time the conference was coming to an end, the then leader of the Labour Party, the now Prime Minister of the UK government, Keir Starmer, gave a live interview on radio where he was asked a very straightforward question: does Israel have the right to cut off gas, water and electricity to the people, the Palestinians in Gaza? And he said Israel does have that right. Keir Starmer is a former international human rights barrister, so he's very well versed with the law, and yet he responded in a very clear-cut manner where he said, yes, it is. This became a very controversial story in the UK, and he was pushed about his response over and over again. Eventually, after about 2 weeks, he said that his response was not in the context in which he gave it in, which makes no sense. So this interview took place on a Wednesday. I arrived back home on a Wednesday. I was very, very shell-shocked by everything that was going on. And I absolutely knew that this was a red line for me. So I wrote to the leader of Oxford City Council and my MP, who is now a minister in the government, Annalise Dodds, and I asked them if this was an official Labour position to endorse collective punishment of the besieged Palestinian population of the Gaza Strip. And I never heard anything back. And then we had senior Labour MPs going on television, on news programmes, repeating the same line. One of them was the Shadow Attorney General at the time. And I couldn't really comprehend that this line of endorsing collective punishment was being rolled out again. So another colleague of mine, who also happens to be of British Pakistani heritage, who's also a councillor in Oxford, he wrote to the same two individuals and asked for clarification. And this time he received a response, which I was copied into. And his question was about the besieged Palestinian population of Gaza and the Labour Party's wording around, endorsing that. And the response was a copy and paste response about Hamas. So we took a deep breath and we decided that this was absolutely unbelievable for us and absurd and horrific, and there was no way that we could allow this to continue. So we resigned. We resigned on a Friday. The context as well is that I'm a former international aid worker of more than 20 years. I've worked across Gaza, I've worked across the West Bank, Lebanon, Jordan, across the Middle East over many years. And I've been to the refugee camps that have been pulverized. I've been to the wasteland that is now Gaza. And it is incomprehensible for me that, as someone who spent more than 20 years advocating for humanitarian access, advocating for international law, humanitarian law to be abided by all parties to a conflict, that we had the then future government of the UK making these type of absolutely horrific statements, and now they're in power. So I resigned along with my colleague, and we put together a statement because I was expecting, I'll be honest with you, a lot of racism and Islamophobia and misogyny. And my time in public office has been littered with lots of racism, death threats, and many other things. The UK has been a very toxic place to live. The political climate here has not been pleasant. And to cut a very long story short now, I have to be honest with you and tell you that the fallout has been minimal in terms of the public reaction to our resignations. Many people across the city that I represent and that I live in wrote to me and wrote to my colleague immediately and said, we stand with you. We are horrified by what's been said by Keir Starmer. We stand fully with you. You know, your values are our values. So it's been very heartening. And I think quite a lot of people were actually surprised that, local government representatives would do this. And so what followed then in the subsequent weeks were 10 other Labour councillors resigned from Oxford City Council, and Labour lost control of the council. They lost the overall control of the council. And what also happened was, I think altogether about 40, maybe more councillors resigned across the country. So in essence, what happened was, by us giving ourselves permission to stand in full solidarity with the Palestinian people and with all oppressed people, all people around the world who are standing up for liberation, and all people who believe in international law and believe in human rights law and believe in the fact that all these laws are there for a reason and they need to be upheld. People decided to take their own permission and stand up and say, no, we're not having this. I'll wrap up on this question by telling you that the hateful rhetoric came from insiders in the Labour Party. So when I resigned along with my colleague, there were people peddling information in the national media where allegedly, well, I say allegedly because I've been told on the record now by Labour people that this did happen, but we were referred to as Labour shaking off the fleas because we happen to be British and Muslim. So that was one of the official responses from an unnamed source in the Labour Party was, it's okay to lose these councillors because actually what we're doing is shaking off the fleas, which is so racist and derogatory and horrific. And the other final point for now for me is on the back of my resignation, I was invited to do quite a lot of media interviews, including live media interviews in TV studios. And it was very interesting, as I said, because I was expecting a backlash and I didn't get one. And I think this is really important to emphasize because I've faced lots of backlashes. I think that the vast majority of people are decent people. And I think that they remain horrified by what's going on. And they were looking for people to take a lead in public office, in public life, to stand up and say, no, this is not happening. So I'm really proud of those people who made that move as well. And the moral of the story really is to stand by your values and don't water them down. And I wear this keffiyeh with pride wherever I go. People want to have a conversation with me about wearing this keffiyeh. And there are also people who say to me, oh, you're really brave for wearing a keffiyeh. And I think to myself, in 2024, if you are deemed to be brave for wearing a piece of material that symbolizes the resistance and the love of life of a group of people, the Palestinians, who are being wiped off the face of the earth, then what does that say about the world we live in?
Thank you very much, Shaista. And thank you also for the reminder that there's a difference between what people in general think and the political elites who are in power at the moment. So Shaista spoke about resigning from her party position. Ria, you also left your job partly due to this issue. What were the constraints that you faced to being political, including on Palestine?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for this opportunity. And I just wanted to say that what Shaista and as I said, it just makes me so hopeful and grateful to be in such company. So I, to quickly try to tell you what happened in the last couple of years is I, for the first time, got into a corporate job setup, and I'm actually a writer, a social worker, and I used to do a whole host of other freelancing and entrepreneurship and work in many different things. But after the pandemic, I thought I was going to go to do this stable income kind of thing and get into this job. Now, this was not something that I knew was not going to really work out for me, but I didn't know how it was going to change my life in terms of my purpose and clarity in terms of my life. So I was working with my branding team in a company, and in 2023, as soon as the genocide started in October, I realized that I had to rip this mask that I was trying to wear, believing that I could play these two lives, like, and it wasn't anything that there was a in the corporate life particularly. It wasn't something that was dramatic or violent that said we couldn't say this or we couldn't do that. Rather, and this is what I would love to speak more about, is that it's the apathy and silence, this garden variety, a lack of character, that was what I feel is the most violent repercussions of our material reality right now. And it's governed so hugely by this imperialist narrative and cultural context. And I think nothing teaches us more violence than the complicity of the everyday. And it's not like I feel like humans are inherently wanting to sit around and talk about KPIs and metrics while babies are being slaughtered on Instagram. And I feel like this is the design, and we've been trained to do that. And so what happened in 2023 was that I was feeling an inability to process these two different worlds. How is a genocide happening? And coming from also a generation where the Holocaust was so drilled into our mind, right? How could something like that happen? Well, now I have a deep understanding of exactly how that happens. And what was happening is that nobody was reacting, nobody was acting like something like this was happening. It was normalized. And I remember there was one moment where one team member of mine said that I'm going to write an email and bring attention and maybe a few fundraisers and say, hey, let's try to at least in the office, band together and do what we can. And that email was met with absolute silence. And and the office is fairly large, like 400 people. And I think that was the moment where we realized, well, this is something we can't do anymore, because this doesn't make sense for us. Whatever we are gaining from this is not the life. This is not something that we've signed up for, because it doesn't feel right. And three of us the very same day left our jobs without any other kind of ideas of what to do, except that we wanted to start something and use our skills and figure out a way to make our baseline better. Like we've come down to such a low level of what is okay as a baseline, that that is something that profoundly moves me, is that we have to walk our talk. We have to practice. We cannot just theorize. We have to practice what we feel so deeply about. And a few months ago, right, we started something called Moonbird Creative, and we just want to work with creators that have factored in that nourishing humanity is a part of their work, right? And whether that's the most obvious spaces like policy and people working on the ground. We want to work with them, but we're also talking about the world that I'm living in, which is privileged by, its urban lens, by my class, right? By the fact that I am not in the middle of a war. So what are the other things going on in humanity right now that need to bring back this desire of what is life affirming to us, no matter what you're doing, whether it's branding or communications or social work or protesting. And what breaks my heart, though, with in terms of conflict happening, is the protest and the organizing that I was trying to do with a lot of my comrades here in Bangalore was met with a lot of police resistance. Police call intimidations, police saying you can't do a protest here, coming and breaking up protests, saying that they're going to file criminal charges. And this is all something that's so bizarre because 8 or 10 years ago, India and Palestine have had a friendship and have recognized each other, right, as an autonomous country. And this is flipped because of this rabbi Islamophobia that's taking over the consciousness of India, for sure. But yeah, I will stop there and say, like, that's the shift that happened in a span of 6 months. Of going through the first 6 months of seeing this kind of apathy and saying, no, I can't do this, I can't be a part of this anymore. But I didn't have the answer as to what the other part of it was, but I just couldn't do that anymore.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ria, for sharing. I think me and other people have also been struggling with this apathy and silence from others at work and in our social circles as well. You actually led me to the next question that I wanted to ask you, which was to talk a little bit more about the Indian context. How is the pro-Palestine movement in India organizing, and what are the challenges?
In the beginning, there was a lot of rises to protest, starting even in Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai. But Delhi started to get, I know there were a couple of protests that went to the Israeli consulate in Delhi, but that was met with a lot of police action, immediate police action, which scared off a lot of people. Bangalore, where I come from, seems to be this much more friendlier place where you could get away with, well, more protests. And I started doing this a series of watermelon walks, which I said, well, they can't say anything if we're just going to wear watermelon t-shirts and bring watermelons and march on one of the most commercial streets in Bangalore, which happens to be Church Street, on a weekday. And we did it, with a small bunch of people. And the heartening thing was people joined us. They said, hey, what are you doing? And they're like, oh, this is for Palestine. And then they started walking with us, and it became bigger and bigger and bigger. And then the police came and broke it down, but we were still successful. And then by the time I was organizing the second one, it became a lot huger. And that's when the police started to really crack down, and they started to call me, and they started to say that intimidate very kindly and politely, I must say. But still tell me that, if you want to protest, you must go to this one little relegated area where nobody really cares, right? Like, a protest is, the point is that you take up the streets, you allow people to, give them the choice to not be bystanders. Because if you're walking down a street and you are saying, hey, come and join us, you are likely to allow people to kind of cross over that bystander effect, and they would join you. But if you're relegated into one little corner with rules, saying you can't say this and you can say that, then it just becomes it becomes a space of collective grieving, which is also valuable, because there's so many people in the city that want to say something and have no other space to collect or to witness this together. And since that was, that, however, that also became a problematic thing. So we started film screenings in Bangalore of Palestinian documentaries. There also the police started to come in, and we invited them in, and we made them watch the documentary. But I think the paranoia is high that we are trying to do some secret underground thing, which we're not. We're just trying to educate the public. We are trying to get people together to say we are not okay with this, and we will make a big fuss about this, and we will strike, and we'll do what is necessary. But it is becoming very untenable because they are slapping us down with criminal charges now, and there is that safety threat for so many people, and the people who are going to get the safety threat the first are going to be the Muslims, because they're the ones who are going to be caught first, because they're looking for that, right? And it is going to be the people who are more disenfranchised and the poorer people who are going to be slapped into the, and people who are more privileged by class and caste in my country. We will still get, we might get a FIR, like a police report on us, but we are more likely to get out of it easier than other people who are also wanting to fight with us. But so it's become a very complicated matter in that space. And it's like now it's almost come to a space where we feel safe only to do this online. There was a big protest last week, again in this relegated area. But they said, the police, that if you put the Palestinian flag out anywhere at this protest, we will put criminal charges on you. Now that's ridiculous. So everybody came and they held watermelon slices and they stood there for hours. So that's what I can tell you about the state of affairs of India right now.
Thank you very much, Ria, and thank you for continuing your activism despite all these challenges. I want to turn to Azza now, and to hear what it's like in Egypt for pro-Palestine activists. You spoke earlier about your funding being cut by the German embassy. Have there been others whose funding has been cut? What other consequences has there been, and how are movements navigating this?
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I closed my picture because the internet in Egypt is very weak. Sorry.
Yeah, I completely understand.
Yeah.
As long as we can hear you, that's all good.
Okay. Let's start with the pro-Palestine, because usual means that there are anti, but we don't have anti-Palestine. Yani in Egypt, all the people with Palestine. And also the situation, it is so difficult. We have dictatorship, and maybe I don't mention this in the beginning. I have travel ban for 6 years in Egypt. And until now, they frozen my account, and we haven't any legal reason. So in Egypt, we can't ask anything logic or legal in Egypt. But about the activists, really, because in this situation, very difficult, like every time they arrested a lot of activists, like 2 days ago, they arrested 6 protesters, just stay like 5 minutes with the Palestinian flags, and they, until now, they don't release the young people. So the situation, it is not easy. In Egypt, nobody cut fund like us, but at least when German embassy cut it out our fund and they cancel our contract with them, 2 NGOs, Egyptian, refused to take money from German embassy. But in Tunisia and Morocco and Palestine, a lot of international organizations cancel the fund to some NGOs in these countries. So this situation, like they banish us, like our regime, like we haven't any difference between them and our regime in Egypt. Everybody banish us. If you think you are you have democratic, or you can have free discourse, never, you are not the same. But the case of Palestine has been the main reason for many young activists to join the public space and participate in political affairs, regretted of their backgrounds. And also the core of the accused is injustice. We can see this in UK, we can see this in America, we can see this in different places in around the world. But also the picture is very clear now. They destroy international law, destroy UN, and this is big problem now in Egypt. Like if we talk with lawyers or activists about UN mechanism, nobody believe in this. And a lot of people believe, and they told with me, we are not the same when we talk about democratic, when we talk about human rights, when we talk about women's rights. And what happened in Germany, when they allow for demonstration for Nazi group, it is very easy and they protect them. But if they have peaceful demonstration to support Palestine, they attack them and arrested them. And I think 2 weeks ago, we can all the world saw the video when the German police ran away after a child just because has a Palestine flag. So, this is shame for this government who all the time talk about human rights. And also many times when I had court in Egypt, many times they came to me and they supported me with the court. But now I never invite them to come with me when I have court. And by the way, the government put me in terrorism court, but I never invite this embassy or EU to come to support me, because really I don't respect them. And this is a shame for them, and the shame for me if I invite them to support me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Azza, for highlighting the continuities between the strategies and tactics of different countries, and also the hypocrisy and double standards that you discussed. So we've heard from Ria and Azza about the context in India and Egypt. Shaista, if we can finish with you now to hear more about the UK context and the backlash to pro-Palestine solidarity activism and how movements in the UK are coping and mobilizing now.
Thanks, Chitra. So here in the UK, we have very loud, unapologetic and active solidarity towards the Palestinian cause, as we should everywhere in the world. And so there have been monthly protests organized. This is now the largest protest movement in recent times on the streets of London and other major cities. We also at the same time are seeing a really vile and horrific demonization of people who are against genocide of the Palestinians and indeed anyone, and object to the way that the UK government is still providing arms to Israel and is still supporting Israel carte blanche. So the protests are very, very varied, very diverse, and massive numbers of people continue to take to the streets once a month at least. And there's lots of localized protests. And what we've had is in the UK, we now have a new Labour government. They've been in power for about 12 or 13 weeks. Prior to that, we've had 14 years of Conservative rule. And before the Conservative government were removed from office, we had the then Home Secretary referring to the pro-Palestinian protests as hate marches. And there's been real dehumanizing of protesters, many of whom happen to be British and Muslim. And to be clear, that is not the only type of people who are out in the streets. The protests are very diverse in a real cross-section of British public as well. But this dehumanizing of people is all part and parcel of the narrative of dehumanizing Palestinians and delegitimizing their right to a state, to a homeland, their right to not be subjected to a genocide, their right to have their laws protected under international law. So it's been really horrifying to see this. And there's also been policing of placards, which protesters carry, and there's been a conflation of a number of issues around free speech and various other things as well. So very recently, we had this bizarre case where a young British Muslim woman was carrying a placard where she had drawn coconuts, and she was referring to then Prime Minister Rishi Sunak as a coconut, and indeed other British Asians who served in the Conservative government. So in the UK, the term coconut basically implies those people who are brown on the outside, yet their politics are not aligned to serving people of colour in a way that is going to improve their rights to housing, rights to employment, and everything else. She was arrested and she was taken to court for carrying that placard. And when she went to court, she actually happened to be heavily pregnant. The case was dismissed pretty immediately by the court. The judge said there was no case to answer to. So this is the kind of over policing and the silencing that's going on in this country. That we've also had huge movements across our campuses at universities, as we've seen in other parts of the world, specifically the US. We've had encampments at the University of Oxford, the University of Cambridge, LSE, UCL, many other institutions. And what I find really interesting is, as I said, I'm from Oxford, and the students set up an encampment there. And what was really powerful was the convergence of the town and the gown. So the city of Oxford, people, everyday people, working class people don't really come into the city that much. They don't feel any connection to the institution that is the university. And through this encampment that the students organized, we had vast numbers of people from our city going into the centre of Oxford, going into the Radcliffe Camera, going to other places that they've never been to before, and supporting the students. So what the students were showing is, the divide between town and gown, class divide, race divide, economics divide, and they were connecting it to the wider story of the liberation of Palestine as well. And I'll just wrap up on this one point where it was very moving to see huge numbers of people, everyday working class people, going down to those encampments and providing food to the students. Huge numbers of migrant women were cooking, including my mum, including my auntie, cooking meals for students. And it was beautiful. It was a community of love and compassion and kindness. And I really have nothing but love and admiration for the students and the way that they brought the people of the city who feel that the institution has kind of locked them out, and large swathes of the city we can't access because we're not students and we don't belong to that institution. For many, it was the first time they were able to access large parts of the city in that way. And I think that is also something really beautiful and powerful. And those encampments were met by the university calling the police on the students. And what we had was, we had particularly British Muslim communities going to the police station outside in Oxfordshire and demanding that their students are released. We had real solidarity taking place, and it was very beautiful and wonderful to see.
Thank you, Shaista, and thank you for bringing, the radical power of care and love into the conversation. That's such a good example. Look, we've got a few minutes now before we've got only a little bit of time. We've gone a bit over to ask our speakers some questions. But before we do that, we just want to give people space to pause and digest everything that's being spoken about. And we also have a chance to invite those of you who want to share your own experiences of resistance you faced, hostility or backlash anonymously. So my colleagues are going to share a link in the chat box to open up these shared slides. And on those slides, there's plenty of blank spaces. And there's space there for you to type your own experiences of backlash, but perhaps also any of the strategies you've used to help you counter backlash that you found helpful. Anonymity is key. You can change any details about what you share to preserve your identity. And what we would really like to do, just so you know what you're inputting into, we would love to use some of these inputs to draw out some key trends in the types of resistance people are facing and to draw out some of the strategies that we are relying on. And we're going to document these in a graphic note by my wonderful colleague Ria, who I know is in the audience today. And we're going to be producing that and sharing that with you in the coming weeks as a learning resource. So what we're going to do is we'll just give you a couple of minutes breathing space for those who might want to do that. It's completely optional. We'll play some music while you have a chance to reflect and share. And for those of you who might prefer to kind of think of some questions for our speakers, there'll be a little bit of time to do that later on. So I'm going to stop. Hopefully you've got the link in the chat box and we'll play a bit of music, I think, while that's going on.
Leve Palestina och krossa sionismen. Leve Palestina och krossa sionismen. Leve, leve, leve Palestina. Leve, leve, leve Palestina. Leve Palestina och krossa sionismen. Leve Palestina och krossa sionismen. Och vi har odlat jorden. Och vi har odlat jorden. Och vi har skördat vetet. Och vi har skördat vetet. Vi har plockat citronerna. Och vi har plockat citronerna. Och pressat oliverna. Och pressat oliverna. Och hela världen känner till vår jord. Och hela världen känner till vår jord. Leve, leve, leve Palestina. Leve, leve, leve Palestina. Leve Palestina och krossa sionismen. Leve Palestina och krossa sionismen. Och vi har kastat stenar på. Och vi har kastat stenar på. Soldater och poliser. Soldater och poliser. Och vi har skjutit raketer. Och vi har skjutit raketer. Mot våra fiender. Mot våra fiender. Och hela världen känner till vår kamp. Och hela världen känner till vår kamp. Leve, leve, leve Palestina. Leve, leve, leve Palestina. Leve Palestina och krossa sionismen. Leve Palestina och krossa sionismen. Och vi ska befria vårt land. Och vi ska befria vårt land. Från imperialismen. Från imperialismen. Och vi ska bygga upp vårt land. Och vi ska bygga upp vårt land. Till socialismen. Till socialismen. Och hela världen kommer att bevittna. Och hela världen kommer att bevittna. Leve, leve, leve Palestina. Leve, leve, leve Palestina. Leve Palestina och krossa sionismen. 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 Palestina och krossa sionismen. Leve Palestina och krossa sionismen. Leve, leve, leve Palestina.
Thank you very much. Listening to our three speakers today, I've been really struck by both the injustice of what's happening in Palestine and the backlash and crackdowns, but also the care, love, joy, and solidarity, which all three of you have spoken about. And so we had a question from the audience, which I'd like each of you to answer in turn, which is, how can we call more people into standing in solidarity and taking meaningful action on Palestine, and potentially also even when we don't agree with each other 100%. So if you can both answer in a couple of lines, if you can all answer in a couple of lines. Maybe Ria, you want to start, and then I'll ask Shaista and Azza to make their contributions.
Oh, Ria, you're on mute.
Sorry. So I think something along these lines has been shared before, and my co-founder at Moonbird, she likes to also quote this. And one thing to remember is we're all one political situation away from us being them and them being us. There is nothing more powerful than being able to find a voice for yourself to say what is acceptable and unacceptable to you. Find what you are able to sacrifice, because there's a spectrum of sacrifice people are giving for this cause today, whether that is putting their life on the line, standing on the streets, quietly working with policy, working on the ground, educating their families. But whatever it is, I think we have to remove this idea that you have to be a certain type of activist or a person who does this kind of work to do this kind of education. This is humanity's work. This is part of everybody's job. And I think if we can remind each other of that, however kindly and compassionately we can remind each other of this, the more likelihood we have of changing this.
Thank you, Ria. Shaista?
Yeah, I recently met up with a very dear friend of mine, a Palestinian from Gaza City. And when we met each other in Istanbul a couple of weeks ago, I felt like I was looking at a ghost. It was really hard to see him and his wife in that state. And when I said, please let me know what I can do. And they said, we want you to carry on wearing that keffiyeh. We want you to carry on wearing your watermelons. And I was like, internally, I was thinking, is that it? Is is that all you want me to do? Because that for me is nothing. The point here is that there are multiple things all of us can do. And for me, I think we also have to hold space for people to come to their own understanding of what they can do as well. What I'm finding is so many people out there want to have conversations and contact with people and ask questions, and they're scared to start a conversation. So if we can keep the space open and those conversations can take place, I think sometimes in activist spaces, there's a real kind of like righteousness that kicks in. A lot of it is really performative and frankly not value orientated. And I don't think that's helpful to anyone. I think what we need to do is hold as much space open as possible for as wide a group of people to come in and for them to educate themselves and understand what their role is. Because I'm telling you now, people everywhere, when I'm walking around in different cities in the UK, people come up to me and say, I really like your scarf. I don't then start lecturing them about, Palestine. I say thank you. And I understand that there's something going on there. So I think that we also have to interrogate ourselves in relation to our own activism and who is this activism for? Who are we reaching out to? And, the story of Palestine, first and foremost, belongs obviously to the Palestinian people. And the liberation of Palestine belongs to all of us. And we have to make sure we all play our part, because we cannot allow this genocide to carry on. This genocide is first and foremost about the Palestinian people, and it's about all of us. It's about all our humanity, and there's too much at stake here. So let's always keep the space open for everyone.
Thank you very much, Shaista. Azza?
Yes, thank you so much. And I agree with my colleague, but I want to also to ask if everybody can ask the government and the parliament to stop to support dictatorship, stop to support Israel, and they try to build in the rule of law. And the international government who destroy Iraq, who destroy Palestine through Israel, who support Sisi in Egypt, who support Libya, who support all these international government who support our dictatorship in our area. So please, everybody can ask the government and the parliament to stop support the dictatorship and also stop support Israel. And also to their voice became loud to support justice, support humanity, support UN mechanism, and also to send a lot of message to Palestine and the Lebanese and in Arab area, you are not alone. We support you. So let us to use, you are not alone. We support you all the time. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all our three speakers and to everybody. I'm going to now hand over to Leila to close our session for today.
Yeah, just a huge, full-throated, full-hearted thank you to all our speakers. But also, I cannot tell you what a boost it's given us to see so many of you on this webinar today and to see so many people registering to attend this webinar away. We are so grateful to you for your presence and your participation. We have some donation links suggested by our speakers. Those of you who might be in a position, and I know not everyone is, but those of you who are in a position to make some donation, Ria and Chitra and our previous speaker, Kifaya Krame, here are some donation links for you if you're not sure where you might want to kind of your money to go. If you are interested in more events like these, we will be holding more. This is the fourth in our series, or perhaps you're craving community with other feminist leaders and you're welcoming spaces where you can have conversations like this. Please consider signing up to our newsletter. We will share the link in the chat with you. And finally, we just want to leave you with the words of Palestinian writer Isabella Hamad, who's written a brilliant book. I've got it here somewhere. It's very short, but it's very powerful. And she tells us it will be easy to say in hindsight, what a terrible thing. That was a terrible moment when the movements of the world were out of my hands. Do not give in. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.